Alright, I just wanted to make this video talking about the situation that we have going on in America with the skilled trades, plumbers, electricians, carpenters, framers, tile workers, the backbone of this country that builds most of the things you see in the places you live in, HVAC technicians. You know, it, it was, there was a time when this was very lucrative and you were fairly compensated for the blood, sweat, and tears and the years of experience and knowledge you gain in these trades, the time and commitment that you give to them, working for different companies where you're basically making a third, often less than what the company is charging for your work. On top of the fact that a lot of these boomers and older generations didn't really want to teach the younger generations and saw everyone basically as competition. And there's just like so many apprentices that don't make it past their second year. I think I saw a statistic somewhere, don't quote me on this, but I think it was like 40% of apprentices don't make it past the second year in electrical. And that's just because I believe a lot of these companies and journeyman, boomer, and whatever older master electricians just fail to properly educate and teach the incoming skilled workers, electricians, apprentices. And for whatever reason, like I said, I don't know if they see them as competition, as a threat to their own job security, but it's like they teach you enough to do all the work, but they basically are like, you're gonna have to learn everything else on your own. And a lot of us who end up in the trades because we for whatever reason we didn't thrive in the academic arena, we're more hands-on learners. We're not like book learners. We're not like, what I mean? There's a lot of electricians that get their licenses and that know the codes, but they do shit work when it comes to using their hands and actually doing the skilled work. A lot of their stuff looks like shit, and I would not hire them even if they got 100 on their electrical test but can't do a basic make up a box and clean, and they're nicking wires, and there's basically risk of fires, like, because they're sloppy at what they do. Anyway, like I'm saying, so it's very imperative that these master electricians and journeyman electricians not just teach you how to do the work, but explain to you what it is you're doing and why you're doing it. And that was something that I found out late into the trades that I wish I had tried to address sooner, and I have, working for other companies now with about 8 years of experience. I let them know, look, I am confident in all my work. I know I do neat, clean, reliable, safe work, better than most. I've been doing high-end residential where there's very small room for error. Everything is very meticulous and has to be a certain way, and I've taken pride in being accountable and letting my master electrician or the company know, like, look, I saw these wires had nicks in them, this low voltage wire got burnt when we were doing the pulls, whatever it may be. I learned these things very early on, that if you address them before they cover the walls up, you can fix them. And it's good to have that accountability, because you don't want to have to go back and trace things when everything's finished and try to re-pull stuff. It's just a hassle, which is why new construction is so much more preferable than remodels or rebuilds. So there's a huge lack of accountability in the trades, I find, as well, where people are just fine doing shit work, and that's not the type of employee, not the type of electrician that I am. So I've been told, in order, if you want to make this much money, you have to get your journeyman's license, and you have to get all this stuff, which is like, I totally understand. But there's people that don't have their license or whatever that have learned a lot of this stuff that I feel like they could be teaching us on the job, and which is actually better for us to learn on the job when we're able to see things, which is like similar to going to a trade school. I would assume, I haven't gone, but I'd like to. I've been having to support myself financially, so I haven't really had the time or the means when I have to provide for a family. But no excuses there. I just feel like the teaching could be so much better. But the main point I'm trying to get the main point I'm trying to get to is that, a lot of these jobs in the trades, that were once so lucrative, and you were able to support a family on and be fairly compensated for the blood, sweat, and tears, time, physical wear and tear that you put into it. You know what I mean? I'm not sitting at a desk all day. I go home and I could, barely pick up my child because my body aches. But, at the time, it was almost worth it to do this, because you would be able to provide for your family and, make sure that your family would be taken care of in the future, be able to buy a house and whatnot, which is another huge crisis in this country right now, where my generation is struggling to be able to afford that, even with these high-paying, skilled labor positions, these jobs, and with many years of experience in them. But, the main point I'm getting to is that the earnings, the amount of money you make doing these jobs, is not keeping up with the cost of living, which is the case with so many other jobs. I totally understand, but it's ridiculous when you got, people working at Starbucks who want to make as much as electricians have been making, because the wages haven't increased. And another main point I'm trying to get to and I want to make is, one of the main reasons that the wages have not increased is because of the illegal immigrants who have poured into our country, who have not only lowered the wages, but have raised the cost of rent. Because when you got 3 people willing to, live in a 1-bedroom apartment, these people are able to charge, $1,600-$1,700 for a studio or a 1-bedroom apartment, when, and they're able to live like that, and they're able to send money back to their home country, where they're able to buy land, buy whatever, have assets, and set their family up for success in the future in their own home country, right? While Americans who don't have that, ability to do that, I don't even think Americans can even go, if we wanted to, into Mexico and just start buying up property in certain places in South America. But, that's like, why should we have to do that anyway? Like, I was basically unable to live in the place that I grew up because I couldn't afford it anymore. Like I said, it was $1,700 for a studio apartment. And when you have a wife and a kid and you're barely making, $25-$30 an hour, you can't really afford to live on that, which is why I left California, on top of many other reasons, like the indoctrination of the schools, the fact that illegals have taken over that state, and they basically conquered California. They've basically, planted the Mexican flag in the grass, and there's not anything our elected officials are doing about it, sadly, because, the corruption and all that. But like I said, I left California and came to North Carolina thinking I could escape all that. I thought this would be a better place for an American to be, farther away from the border and a lot of the, corruption that's going on in those blue states and different parts of, of our country that have been invaded and conquered, basically taken over for the time being. And, I came here and to find that it's actually worse. The illegals have completely taken over the construction industry, to where they're like subcontracting these jobs out to illegals. And it's, even if you own your own business, it's like really hard to compete with these illegals who are willing to do all this work for dirt cheap, And I've also come to find that not only do they do the work for dirt cheap, And it's all about cheap and fast. Get it done cheap and fast. That's what all these corporations or companies are hiring these subcontractors, these illegals to do. And when you do that, you end up seeing that the work is horrible. I mean, there's hundreds and probably thousands of videos on YouTube that are showing how everything, a lot of the construction work you see done today, you know, in this time, it's very unreliable. It's absolutely crap work, you know. Things aren't done right, you know. Nothing's up to code. It's sloppy. Like I said before, things aren't safe. There's no accountability. These people come into our country illegally. No one knows their name. A lot of the times they're not wearing a job uniform. They're not wearing any type of work shirts. So you don't even know who they're working for. Like, they're just mysterious subcontractors, guys that are coming in because another illegal got them hired and is going to pay them, you know, and the company is going to pay them dirt cheap wages that your average American and, you know, whatever can't really compete with. So, you know, these illegals have poured into our country, lowered the wages, raised the cost of living. They're doing horrible work. And I don't just mean to attack the illegals. You know, this isn't I know I don't mean to rant just about illegal immigrants, because I totally understand that they're trying to, you know, make a better life for their children, you know, even, you know, sending money back to Mexico where they can go live and retire, whatever. I can't really blame them when our system is allowing that to happen, when these companies are hiring them. You know what I mean? These American, you know, business owners, like project managers, contractors, are subcontracting the job out to them, because I've spoken to superintendents on these jobs who are complaining about all these illegals and who claim to be, like, even admittedly racist, which, you know, that's fine. Like, this is America. You have the right to think and believe whatever you want to believe and want what's best for your race and your country. Every other race does. It's totally fine to say brown pride, black pride. You should be able to say white pride too. American pride, I'm all for that, to each their own. But in the same, you know, sentence, in the same paragraph, they'll also say, but, you know, we need them for our company, basically because they want to make as much money as possible. It all comes down to greed. It's modern day slavery. These illegals are basically like modern day slaves, because they're basically working for nothing in America. And, you know, I've just been thinking about it a lot. It's like, you know, it's crazy. It's supposed to be illegal to hire these illegals, right? I have a song where I say, can't blame it on the workers when exploited by the businesses, right? Can't blame it on the illegals when these businesses are exploiting them. But, you know, I'm checking right now, the Criminal Resource Manual, CRM, 1500 to 1999. It's 1908, Unlawful Employment of Aliens, Criminal Penalties. Title 8 USC 1324AA1A makes it unlawful for any person or other entity to hire, recruit, or refer for a fee for employment in the United States an alien, knowing the alien is an unauthorized alien as defined in subsection 1324A(h)(3). Subsection 1324A2 makes it unlawful for any person or entity, after hiring an alien for employment, to continue to employ the alien in the United States, knowing the alien is or has become an unauthorized alien with respect to such employment. Subsection 132AF provides that any person or entity that engages in a pattern of practice of violations of subsections A1, A, or A2 shall be fined not more than $3,000 for each unauthorized alien with respect to whom such a violation occurs, imprisoned for not more than 6 months for the entire pattern or practice, or both. The legislative history indicates that a pattern or practice of violations is to be given a common sense rather than overly technical meaning, and must evidence regular, repeated, and intentional activities, but does not include isolated, sporadic, or accidental acts. H.R. Rep. number 99-682, Part 3, 99th Congressional, 2nd Session, 1986, P59, is all this legalese. A scheme for civil enforcement of the requirements A through injunctions and monetary penalties is set forth. In addition, 18 U.S.C. 1546b makes it a felony offense to use a false identification document or misuse a real one for the purpose of satisfying the employment verification provisions in 8 U.S.C. So basically, they're hiring these illegals, and they could just say, I didn't know he wasn't illegal. He said that he was illegal on the application, if they even have to fill out an application, right? If they're really even paying taxes. We're learning about all this fraud taking place in this country right now, where there's tons of unemployment frauds, people using fake social security numbers, disability fraud. It's just out of control in this country. But one of the main issues that is affecting your average everyday blue collar American citizen is these illegals taking all the jobs, lowering the wages, raising the cost of living, and they're not enforcing the laws that say it's supposed to be illegal to hire these illegals. You know what I'm saying? And with punishment of fines, even in imprisonment. It's supposed to be like, where are the checks and balances here? Like, who's holding these companies accountable and keeping them from employing these people for basically slave labor wages? Like, this is having a huge impact and would make a huge difference in our country if these laws were actually enforced, and where your average American blue collar worker, with skills in the trades, like, could be fairly compensated and making a decent living. You know what I mean? Or like more business owners would be able to get these jobs, American business owners, at wouldn't have to compete with these illegals who are doing it for dirt cheap. So that's basically the point that I want to make. And I see these videos telling people, get in the trades, like that's where it's at right now. There's no jobs, AI is replacing all the jobs. And all I can say is, right now where we're at, if you are going to get in the trades, be ready to deal with illegal immigrants who mostly do not speak any English, who are going to lower all the wages, and your people in the trades just aren't getting the respect that they deserve for what they do. It's like really disheartening in a way, and it's a struggle. I don't know how much longer I'm going to be here in North Carolina. I'm thinking about moving farther north and trying to get away, and I'm thinking of trying to get out of the trades, because I just don't feel like it's fulfilling as fulfilling as it should be. I have worked for, as I said, high-end residential companies that, you were able to meet the owner, and, oftentimes they would show appreciation for your work. And there are some electrical companies out there that are hiring, Americans, and going by the book, and, very rarely, but sometimes paying very well, and teaching their employees. And much respect to the companies that are doing that, and the business owners and future business owners that keep these things in mind and that are fair, because the way the world is going, it's like there's so much greed and corruption, and it's just not the way it should be. I guess that's all I'm really trying to say. And for all the millennials, Gen X, Gen Z, Alpha, Beta generation, whatever it is, I just pray that we can get this fixed. I pray that we won't let this continue the way that the boomers allowed this society and this system to collapse, free fall the way that it has been. We really need to get it together, people, for future generations. Otherwise, we're not going to have a country, and we're not going to have a future for our children to thrive in, as it should be, being, such a powerful nation and having so much potential. So, as I said, I'm thinking about getting out of the trades, maybe getting into something else where I can feel as though I'm, really making a contribution to society and being, um, able to have the, fulfillment that I would like to have in pursuing a career and dedicating so much of my time and energy to being the best that I can be. I feel like that's all we really want, as as a as a people, for the majority. Maybe not actually. There's some people that don't want to work and don't want to reach their full potential, and I sadly work with a lot of those types of people, and probably getting paid just as much as they are. And I hear it so often where people are just like, I'm not gonna keep going out of my way to doing all this extra stuff, working extra hard for a company that is going to pay me the same if I just slack off like everybody else, right? And it seems as though the only way it's worth it to be in the trades nowadays is if you actually own your own company and are able to find the jobs and get the work, even competing with all these illegals, like. And that's a whole nother video in itself. And some people don't want to have to take on all that responsibility and all that stress, like, and we shouldn't have to. If you want to just be a great employee and be an electrician without having to be a business owner, you should be able to do so. And I pray that I find my way, and I pray all of you do as well. So again, nothing against all the illegal immigrants that are here doing what most people would do in their shoes. I'm not saying I'm for it. I support, ICE and the border laws and our border patrol and our police enforcement, and that's like what the majority of this country voted for, and I fully am on board with that, because we shouldn't be supporting these people's lives and futures to the detriment of our own countries, right? Otherwise, like, we don't even have a country, right? What did our ancestors fight in these wars and battles and die for? And why did they sacrifice so much for? Like, my grandpa was in World War II, and he gave so much and wanted so much for his family, for his future. And for some reason that was lost on the boomers, maybe because they were given everything. They inherited everything. They knew that they had everything handed to them on a silver platter, basically, because the silent generation had to go through so much, with the Depression, the world wars, and, wanted to do everything they could to ensure that their family would have a stable future. I believe that we need to go back to that. And if there's one thing we can learn from the boomers, it's not to be like them, because we see what's going on in our society today. It's collapsing, and we need to fix it. We need to return to, nationalistic, ideologies, and be proud Americans. And, we need to return to traditional values and restore our identity as Americans and our culture, which is hardworking, honest, high integrity, high trust, respecting our founders and our ancestors and the people who built this country. And for every person who says, you guys are colonizers and this is stolen land, like, there's no land on earth that hasn't been conquered, or tribes have warred and people have enslaved other tribes. Like, you should be proud and happy that you live in the land of the free, where this was founded by our founding fathers who wanted the best for humanity. You know what I mean? You think it was all like butterflies and rainbows with the natives, but before Europeans, whatever you want to call us, before American founders, before we came here, they were eating children as a delicacy. You know what I mean? I know there's a small tribe of people who are still doing that today for different, practices, and have a completely different belief systems, which doesn't align with Christian values, as much as they want to say that we are aligned with them. It's like absolutely not. And there was a time when these people would be held accountable, and I'll just say that, and held to the highest extent of the law for the crimes they're committing. And I pray that one day they will be. Let's see if I can say that in a way that won't get me banned. So, wishing everybody the best out there. I hope this video inspires some of you to I don't know, rethink what it is you want to do with your life, maybe. I don't know, to get involved in bettering our country in any way possible. Maybe just who it is you vote for, if you still believe in elections. I don't know. But just as we I need and require identification for employment, as we should, to protect employers and Americans, we should have that for voting, right? Voter registration. We're finding out about all the fraud there, which is a whole nother video in itself. But I just hope that you got some value out of this video, and I thank you for listening and watching if you made it this far. May God bless you and your family. God bless America, and take care.